Call of Duty Zombies community has been alive for decades, with its roots being planted all the way back in 2008 with World at War. Throughout the mode's existence, there has been an abundance of highs with some unforgettable lows which nearly pushed the community to the brink of collapse. In addition to the ups and downs the mode experienced, some notable changes in the core gameplay has also been observed. Within many of the older Call of Duty games, Zombies was a mode that plunged the player into chaos, incentivizing skill and rewarding those who took the game seriously. However, in recent years, the once skill-focused mode has turned into an almost casual experience that gives the player all the tools they need from the very beginning. In this video, I will try my hardest to answer the question, when did the game mode of Zombies turn its back on skill and transform into an almost laughable side mode? Now, picture this. The year is 2008, and you just spent countless hours completing the World at War campaign. You think you're finally done, you've beat the game, and you can move on to the multiplayer, but no. Your character opens her eyes multiple times until finally, out of the fog and wreckage, a deranged figure comes sprinting at you, later to be defined as the first zombie. Now, back in 2008, this was a brand new addition to the Call of Duty universe. Players were not only frightened, but also still trying to get their bearings on the overall mechanics. This is, in part, why World at War was so difficult. Not only was the mode new, but the game wasn't all too friendly either. When going for knife kills in World at War, oftentimes you would end up being lunged into the zombies through the barrier, allowing yourself to become susceptible to taking more downs. Not only was the knifing mechanic very buggy at times, but the zombies would almost pull you into them as you ran by, giving them the nickname of the Black Hole Zombies, which still holds up today. World at War was also on a 2-hit down system, with jugs sometimes being glitched and not working, and the maps were very basic, with the notable exception of the Reese, which introduced Pack-a-Punch, the first step back from skill. Now, I know what you're thinking. Pack-a-Punch is needed for the player to get through rounds, and if it wasn't an option, the player wouldn't be able to get past round 20. And yeah, I agree. Pack-a-Punch is a great thing to include in the game, it makes it fun, and the impact it has made has been catapulted to every other Zombies game. However, this does still take away some skill from Zombies, even if it's for a good cause. Now, players like Krups would go on to prove that Pack-a-Punch wouldn't be needed to hit high rounds, and even up into the thousands, but not everyone is a Krups at Zombies, and this is why World at War is still very difficult for most players. Apart from World at War, the next two installments of Zombies were around the same skill gap. Both were 2-hit down systems with the exception of Permajug on Black Ops 2. There was one thing that these games seemed to enjoy a lot, which could have been a plus and a takeaway from skill at the same time: wonder weapons. Black Ops 1 wasn't the first game to introduce wonder weapons, but it was the first to polish them. Back in World at War, the Wonder Waff was glitchy and unpredictable, and hitting yourself with a shot would disable Juggernog, but in Black Ops 1, the wonder weapons were all complete. The Thunder Gun, which was introduced into the first map, Keynote or Toten, was a get-out-of-jail-free card, blowing back any and all zombies that got in your way. It was the first real overpowered thing we ever saw in Zombies, and still to this day, one of, if not the best, wonder weapon of all time. Now, 5 was different. On 5, you had limited space to train, and no real good options for camping or getting to high rounds easily. The wonder weapon, the Winter's Howl, was also pretty bad, which heightened the skill gap once more. And perhaps this is why many players state that Black Ops 1 was so hard. The game had many easy maps and weapons, but then countered that with weapons or maps that would take skill to learn. For example, on Shangri-La, the baby gun was overpowered, but the map itself limited the amount of space you had to use it. There were also traps, napalm zombies, screechers, and monkeys on top of the zombies, further pushing the amount of skill necessary to get better at the map. On Call of the Dead, George Romero would follow the player around the entire map endlessly, allowing the player to make decisions about where to train or run to. The Scavenger and VR11 were also very weak, which meant that a lot of strategy would have to go into hitting high rounds. I would say that at the end of the day, Black Ops 1 was a game that matched the skill with the fun. The game allowed the player to hop into an easy match of Ascension, but then when they wanted to be challenged, they could go into Shang or 5. Now, for Black Ops 2, it was more of the same. Treyarch added fairly easy maps like Buried and would balance the skill by adding Mob of the Dead. One thing that was done perfectly for Transit was adding the survival maps. If you wanted to play the chaotic, foggy Transit all on its own, you could take the initiative to play the original. But if you wanted a relaxing time playing Zombies, you could pick up a game of Town. These small maps added a way for players to learn a part of the bigger map with the addition of some perks and Pack-a-Punch on Town. Nuketown was also a way for players to focus on their skill and was often stated as being a good map for players to improve on. Despite these harder maps, Origins would be the next fall off from skill. Origins gave the player an opportunity to gather a team of 4 and get some of the most overpowered wonder weapons ever, and for the first time, every every player on the team could get the main wonder weapon, obviously having a different staff per player, and with these staffs, they would be able to do the Easter egg very easily. The main boss in Origins, the Panzer, was definitely a way to try and set back the advantage of not having a staff and try to push the players to learn more about the map. This was, however, a detriment to the game, as once you found out how to build the staff, the Panzer would be dead in a few quick shots. Origins tried to balance out the staffs by making the more overpowered ones take longer to shoot, but this would just give the player an opportunity to grab a different staff to fit their playstyle. And even with the staffs, the 2-hit down system was hard to master, and getting through the entire map to build a staff before round 8 could be difficult at times. In these older games like World at War, Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2, Treyarch really taught the player how to get good at the mode and how to learn both the maps and how to play them. That was until Black Ops 3. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that Black Ops 3 is insanely easy, but it's definitely more casual than the 3 games before it. For starters, Black Ops 3 was the first of the Black Ops games to switch from the 2-hit down system that we were used to for 7 years and rather utilize the new 3-hit system. This was a massive change to the skill gap. The 3-hit down system made everything better. Knifing was easier, as there was less of a chance of getting hit too many times. Jug wasn't necessarily needed until a higher round, which gave the player the freedom to grab other perks before, and most of all, the new system gave players the ability to survive for longer than before. And I can attest to this. When I went back to Black Ops 1 and 2 to play zombies for this video, I had a hard time adjusting to the 2-hit down system, and I took many downs getting the footage. But Black Ops 3 is different. When I die on Black Ops 3, it's usually just for my stupidity and not my skill. Now, the 3-hit down system wasn't the only implementation on the new game, but also the major addition of Gobblegums. Gobblegums gave every player a random chance to get a different Gobblegum from their selected pack every game. This could range from a not so bad Gobblegum like Burned Out to an overpowered gum like Perkaholic. You see the problem here? Gobblegums are insanely unbalanced. They give the player practically everything they need by round 5. From a pack-a-punch gun to opening up the entire map with a single gum, Gobblegums can be used for everything. This is one of the major problems with the skill gap in Black Ops 3. They give no real incentive to progress through the maps irregularly, instead giving the player the ability to divert from the intended path. There were other changes to the game on top of Gobblegums in the 3-hit down system. These changes range from the new movement to the alternate ammo types that would be necessary for almost every high round in the game. Now, I'll give credit where it's due. The sliding mechanic is very learnable with enough play hours. You can infinitely slide if you time your jumps right, or you can slide, change weapons, stand, and slide again if you want an even faster boost. This skill can best be observed when looking at speedruns. Speedrunners have perfected the slide mechanic, and it shows. The difference between a casual player's movement and a speedrunner's is absurd. Their ability to master the movement mechanics and slim down speedrun times by large amounts is why I believe the new mechanics didn't take away skill, as some may argue, but rather increase the skill gap by allowing the more experienced players to become faster and more efficient in-game. Now, alternate ammo types are the opposite. Alternate ammo types, or AATs, are abilities that your gun can earn if you double pack it. These abilities can range from a zombie who can join your side to help, to a barrage of gunfire from a firework blast. But by far the strongest AAT is Deadwire. Deadwire is used for the majority of the high round strategies and can kill a maximum of 9 zombies. Now, 9 zombies doesn't sound too bad, it honestly sounds quite balanced until you realize that the cooldown for Deadwire is a diabolical 5 seconds, allowing the player to progress through rounds extremely fast by just using their AAT alone. Treyarch also added different variations of the shield buildable from Black Ops 2. The Rocket Shield and the Dragon Shield were nice additions to the game that both protected the player and killed zombies in the process. The Dragon Shield especially was very overpowered once obtained and could blast an entire horde whenever you fired it. Apart from the base mechanics of the game though, Black Ops 3 had some very diverse zombies maps. From Shadows of Evil to Revelations, Black Ops 3 gave the player a plethora of maps to learn and play on, ranging from fairly easy to very difficult. Shadows was a very middle-of-the-road map that could be quite easy to play on once you learned the layout and got the Apothecon, but for newer players could be quite tricky. It also introduced many new mechanics that were also specifically made for that map, including Beast Mode, which allowed players to open up various different perks, doors, and hidden places, which in other maps would have simply required a power switch. Drak, on the other hand, practically walked you through the map and gave players an easy time getting Pack-a-Punch, which lowered the difficulty significantly in the map. DE also gave the player not just one, but access to 4 overpowered wonder weapons, which could carry them well past round 100. DE brought back the Panzer for the first time since Black Ops 2, but again destroyed the difficulty with the 4 elemental bows. The Giant was almost a 1-to-1 replica of Derice from World at War, and was also an easy map if you had Deadwire and trained in the spawn room. But apart from that, the Giant made the original Derice experience easier because of all the innovations in Black Ops 3. The Giant was often viewed as the map where less experienced players would go instead of Shadows at the launch of the game. The next 2 installments into Black Ops 3 is the reason why I would say that Black Ops 3 is actually pretty hard. Zetsubo no Shima and Grad Krovi were 2 titans of maps that were actually quite difficult for both new and experienced players. ZNS required extensive knowledge of the layout of the map, where each part was, and how to turn on power while draining the player of thousands of points. The map also had a very mid-tier wonder weapon, and when used, could only be shot a couple times before running out of ammo. The Thrasher, the main boss, was a bullet sponge and honestly rivals the Black Ops 6 Manglers for how many can spawn in one round. When killed, the Thrasher drops nothing, which makes your experience playing the map extremely taxing. With all the tight corners and the tanky boss zombies, ZNS could be considered a pretty demanding task if wanting to indulge. Grad Krovi, on the other hand, was a combination of all the prior, dialed up to a 10. GK's layout is still one of the most confusing layouts in all of COD Zombies for a first-time player. The many alleyways, twists and turns, and upstairs and downstairs are tricky for even the most experienced players to learn. GK also introduced the Ray-Gun Mark III, which, while powerful in the early rounds, suffered from the zombies' infinite health in the later rounds. The 2 boss zombies, the Mangler and the Valkyrie drone, were completely new bosses, and both were a pain to kill without the Mark III. On top of that, the zombies seem significantly harder to deal with, especially with all the twists and turns of the war-torn map. Comparing GK to the rest of the BO3 maps, it's easy to say that it takes the cake for being the hardest of them all. But the final map, Revelations, was a massive step down from the skill level of almost every map before it. It gave players the 2 most overpowered wonder weapons, the Thundergun and the Apothecon Servant, along with the little Arnie's from Shadows of Evil, the Ragnaroks from DE, and the most overpowered camping strategy of all time. The minimal spawn rate of the Margwas and Panzers were almost no match for the arsenal that the game would allow the player to have. It's so easy that, to this day, it still stands as one of the fastest world record round 100s pre-Black Ops Cold War. Now, Black Ops 3 was easy, there's no doubt about it, but that doesn't mean that there weren't times when players could be challenged by the various parameters that a map contained. And up until this point, the core mechanics like the perk system remained fairly the same, and the 2-hit down system being changed was a minor difference in the difficulty downgrade, but in Black Ops 4, that couldn't be further from the truth. Now, originally when I was planning to write the script for the Black Ops 4 section, I planned on writing about how Black Ops 4 was easy, and how the game provided the player with a specialist weapon on round 1, along with arguably the best grenade of all time, 200 HP, and a knife on your starting gun that could easily get you to round 5 all by itself. And while all these additions to the game made it incredibly easy in the early and late game, the mid-rounds were a much different story, which I'll dive into later. Before we talk about how strenuous the mid-game could be, we do have to mention how easy Black Ops 4 Zombies was in the early rounds. Firstly, the biggest change to Black Ops 4 was the perk system. This new system limited the player to only 4 pre-selected perks they could buy in-game. These 4 perks were locked in as soon as you picked them, and were the only perks you could get during the game besides from using elixirs or doing side Easter eggs for more. This system hinders the player significantly, as the 4 perks you had would define how you played the game. For example, if one of your perks was Stone Cold Stronghold but you trained for the majority of the game, the 4 perks were practically reduced to 3. And the entire purpose of the perk system was to eliminate crutch perks, but Black Ops 4 made them almost worse. The overpowered perks like Dying Wish, Victorious Tortoise, Time Slip, and Winter's Wail were the best by far, and were used by most of the player base. There was no need to run other perks because the best perk setup was usually the same from map to map. Black Ops 4 also eliminated the main use for quick revive and granted the player 2 self-revives every game. These new crutch perks and the automatic self-revives made the player practically invincible in the early rounds, and in some cases, actually invincible. Upgradable specialists and Wraithfire grenades gave the players the best weapons at round 1. The specialists varied from map selection as well as what storyline was utilized. The Chaos maps had the Hammer, the Scepter, the Viper and Dragons, and the Shock Rims, and they were all overpowered and balanced out with each other. However, on the Aether maps, Takio's Katana and the Ragnaroks were by far the best specialist. They were both drastically different from each other, but could both kill entire hordes with one activation. The Katana could slash through trains of zombies while thrusting you forward, and the Ragnaroks could be placed down to eliminate anything running at you. These overpowered specialists in Black Ops 4 allowed even the newest players to thrive in the early rounds. Another addition to the player's arsenal were the special grenades and Wraithfires. These grenades were rechargeable over time, and the Wraithfires dealt infinite damage. The Monkey Bombs and Homunculus weren't as powerful as as the base weaponry, and you were practically given all of the tools to do well right off the bat without doing side quests or spinning the mystery box. Black Ops 4's variety of different shields helped create differing approaches to each map, with some shields being more of a protection-based tool and others being used for killing zombies. Every map in Black Ops 4 had a shield, which allowed players to become less open to taking downs. Besides all the additions to the game mentioned already, Black Ops 4 also introduced a new variation of the Gobblegum system called elixirs. Elixirs worked in similar ways to Gobblegum, but with some colossal changes. The base elixirs given to the player were overpowered and used by the majority of the player base. Temporal Gift, Aftertaste, Anywhere But Here, and Equipment were available for all players right away. These common elixirs eliminated the need for the long grind of obtaining the rare ones naturally, thus allowing more players to get the higher rounds. Now, I have to ask, were these inclusions just lowering the skill gap artificially? The players aren't necessarily getting better at the game, they just have the resources to get the higher rounds. And in the earlier games without specialists or gobblegum, it was exponentially harder to get past wave after wave. Let's take a flashback to the introduction of Pack-a-Punch. This was a revolutionary change that not only made your weapon stronger, but also gave unique abilities for some select weapons like the 1911. Pack-a-Punch felt balanced, and for 5,000 points, which took some time to acquire, you could have a better weapon. You had to put in the work in order to feel as if you were progressing through the game, which felt like a natural flow. However, with the overpowered additions of the newer games, the ability to hit high rounds and avoid going down was rampantly increased. Even the gobblegums got easier to use, as Black Ops 4 allowed the player to carry 4 elixirs at any time, eliminating the need to spend points or spin for even a chance at getting the one you need. This natural progression seen in the earlier titles hindered the player significantly unless they were doing something about it. But enough of talking about the early game. Black Ops 4's mid-game was grueling. The mid-game was especially hard, and from what I gathered, getting gameplay was difficult for no specific reason. The zombies just felt harder to get by, and they could hit you easier while training. Every time you got even remotely close, zombies would swing in advance, and the spawn system in Black Ops 4 was one of the worst we've ever seen. Wherever you're wanting to go, there's already zombies there. Combined with all the small doorways and corridors in Black Ops 4, the spawn system made for some of the most close-quartered gameplay from zombies we've seen yet. All of the bosses, special zombies, and super sprinters at the mid-rounds make Black Ops 4 harder than Black Ops 3 in some ways. Moving away from the mechanics and onto the maps, Black Ops 4 had perhaps the most diversity we've ever had in zombies. From the Pentagon and Area 51 to the Lost City of Delphi, Black Ops 4 made the player adjust to different playstyles and improve on maps individually. Voyage of Despair restricted the player to tight hallways and had debris in the way of easily trainable areas. The bosses were also tanky, and if you didn't have the Wonder Weapon or Helion Salvo, you were virtually shooting a pellet gun. On top of all these bosses, the Catalyst would swarm you and make Voyage even harder to navigate. The Kraken's upgrades felt weak, and they all felt like an underpowered rocket launcher. This trend of lackluster wonder weapons carried on to 9 as well. The Circuit's Kiss was cool to use, but impractical when it came to the damage output. The exploit to shoot faster made it a lot better, but not many players played on keyboard and mouse. The main advantage of 9 was how open it was. 9 provided the player with 2 large training rooms with lots of space to train, which allowed for most casual players to get the higher rounds. Now, Blood of the Dead is regarded as the hardest map on Black Ops 4, and one of the hardest maps ever. It was a remaster of Mob of the Dead from Black Ops 2, but added different areas like the Catwalk, which was extremely hard to get through without a specialist. The Magma Gat was actually decent compared to the prior Wonder Weapons, and had a Monkey Bomb type effect when shot. Blood of the Dead also brought back the Hell's Retriever, but was overshadowed by the already overpowered starting grenades. The last launch map, Classified, was another remaster. Classified brought back the Winter's Howl from Black Ops 1, and made it better by dealing more damage. Classified also added the somewhat open training space of Area 51, which gave the player more space to train than 5. This made the original Black Ops 1 experience more straightforward and got rid of the suffocating atmosphere of 5. Dead of the Night was fairly difficult because of all the extra bosses and confusing map layout, but in my opinion is one of the best examples of how a map's difficulty should be designed. While the map is hard at first, once you memorize all the part spawns and buildables, you could bunker down with an overpowered wonder weapon and kill everything in your way. Much like Pack-a-Punch and Doris, getting set up on Dead of the Night rewarded the player afterwards. And yes, while it was taxing to get to that point, it was attainable if you knew the map, and was a great example of how difficulty should be designed around a map. Ancient Evil shared a lot of common ground with Drak in Black Ops 3. The 4 gauntlets added different playstyles and were all good with the downside of limited ammo. The gauntlets were also very easy to get, but took some time to upgrade, similar to the bows. The base gauntlets would carry you to the mid-game, but would fall off if they weren't upgraded. The Giganese was a bullet sponge and would take ages to kill with regular weapons. The Pegasus Strike, which was added in Ancient Evil, both distracted and eliminated all zombies, and is basically the only feasible special grenade to use over the Wraith fires. Its only downside was that it took time to place, but if you were smart, you could avoid taking hits. Again, this addition is how difficulty should be utilized in the core mechanics of the game. Alpha Omega is the next map on the list, and was fairly difficult because of all the disappointing wonder weapons and the close-quartered gameplay. The variants of the Nova Crawlers were annoying and would get in your way while training. The Mark II modifications were flat out bad, and most lacked in ammo or just couldn't kill zombies into the mid-rounds. On top of the weapons, pack-a-punch would be locked down throughout the game, and you would have to stand still at 4 vents around the map for more than 10 seconds each. This artificial difficulty added to Alpha Omega is why the map is considered not only one of the worst, but one of the hardest in Black Ops 4. The final map, Tag Your Toten, brought back features from previous maps while also adding new buildables, which changed the way you play the game. Tag was mainly an open map with some exceptions in the boat and facility. The wonder weapons on the other hand were lackluster and worse than the original variants. Again, the Helion salvo was both better and faster to get than the Thundergunner Wonderwaff, and the Samantha boxes were downright terrible. The newest feature of Tag was the Dynamite buildable, which gave players the option of opening up different parts of the map. This created new playstyles and shortcuts, which helped players navigate and survive. Once more, the player needed to put in the work to have an easier time playing the map, and I wish features like Dynamite were brought back in other Zombies games. Overall, Black Ops 4 was challenging to get a true scale of how difficulty was dispersed throughout the game. In some cases, Black Ops 4 could even be considered the most challenging Zombies game of all time. But I do think that Black Ops 4 has enough in common with its predecessor that I can say the skill level ranges across map selection as well as personal experience. But in the next installments of COD Zombies, the skill required to play would become nearly wiped out of conversation. Let's begin this chapter by stating the obvious. I'm only going over the Black Ops Zombies games. This means that titles that have spin-offs of the original experience like Advanced Warfare or World War II aren't going to be included. I also just have more knowledge about the Black Ops games, and I want this video to solely focus on where the skill went throughout the years with a specific zombie series. That being said, Black Ops Cold War was different. From the new crafting table that gave you all the tools you'd ever need, to the ability to spawn in with any weapon of your choice at round 1, Black Ops Cold War didn't just raise or lower the skill gap, rather, it redefined it. Possibly the biggest change that came with Cold War Zombies was the armor system. This allowed every player to spend various amounts of the new salvage drops in exchange for different tiers of armor, which protected the player throughout the rounds. This armor would protect you from 60% of all attacks, stacked on top of the 150 starting health. Coupled with the upgradable perks, which we'll look at later, you could have a total of 250 HP plus the damage mitigation of armor. The damage taken from the zombies varied from each round as well. From rounds 1 to 9, you could take 5 hits before you'd go down. Then, from rounds 10 to 30, it would revert to the typical 3-hit system that the prior games used. However, from rounds 31 plus, it would only take 2 hits to down. On the surface, this seems balanced, as both the zombies' health and speed would increase with the rounds. However, I failed to mention that these statistics were all without Jug and armor. This is a major problem with Cold War. If you were surrounded, you had time to evaluate and execute an escape plan, which in other Zombies titles would require extremely quick thinking. The perk system was amended once again, as upgrades took the place of the modifier slot of Black Ops 4. Every perk was upgradable over time, and eventually even made the weaker perks somewhat usable. You could choose to gain an additional 100 HP with Juggernog, or choose to no longer have sprint fall off with stamina, but in the end, every perk would be upgraded fully. By far the best upgrade, however, was Tier 5 for Quick Revive. This upgrade would allow players to get revived for free if they could kill even a single zombie while down. With the ray gun, you were practically unkillable, as your self-revives wouldn't even deplete after. This mechanic single-handedly made the entirety of Tombstone useless and even removed the majority of the need for having self-revives. On top of the upgrades, Treyarch decided to remove the perk limit, allowing you to have every perk in the game. This was extremely overpowered, and almost made it a struggle to die up until the late game. The player was given yet another tool to get past the early game, that being the ability to start the game with any weapon of your choice, and even have the ability to spawn in with an epic rarity weapon depending on if they did the super Easter egg. This completely ruined the progression of the game, as you could easily get past round 15 all by using your starting gun. And while the typical common rarity weapons would fall off, this ability to use an epic gun made progressing the game even faster. And did I mention that Pack-a-Punch in Cold War had 3 tiers, with the final tier making almost every weapon able to kill past the zombie health cap. Ammo mods also received upgradable variants, with every mod being viable through the rounds. But back to weapon upgrades, the final legendary rarity would take 1000 salvage to get, but it was way more obtainable by starting with an epic gun, and the leftover salvage previously used to buy weapon upgrades could instead be used to help the player get every armor tier more easily. Another use for salvage was the crafting tables around the map. These tables allowed for the player to buy different lethals, tacticals, and score streaks to help progress the rounds. However, grenades and tacticals would sometimes drop from zombies, which pushed players to spend their salvage on score streaks instead. Ranging from a war machine to a chopper gunner, Cold War had a complete arsenal of overpowered tools the player could use to aid them against the undead. The chopper gunner, for example, was able to be quickly pulled out before taking it down and would give the player upwards of 60 seconds in the clear. Alone, these score streaks broke Cold War Zombies, as in the higher rounds, you could cycle out the war machine endlessly, earning more salvage than you'd spend. The last feature Cold War brought was the field upgrade system. Like Black Ops 4's specialist system, field upgrades were rechargeable over time and would help in different ways. Healing Aura would heal all players and was especially useful for co-op, as you could revive your teammates from across the map. But Ring of Fire reigned supreme as the best of the bunch. Ring of Fire acted like a stock option gobblegum from Black Ops 3, but would also increase the damage output tremendously. You could shred through every boss in the game, while also dealing AoE damage to the zombies around you. This reconstruction of the entirety of the zombies mode not only lowered the skill gap once again, but almost made it impossible to identify. Looking deeper into the maps, Black Ops Cold War only had 4, and all were rather unchallenging. The Machine took Nocturne and Toten and made it into an entire facility with the ability to go on the grounds around and under the original Noct. Unlike the original experience, The Machine also allowed players to play on top of the building, which had one of the best camping strategies of all time. You could line up shots on the zombies and never have to worry about going down. The new boss, the Megaton, was quite a balanced boss zombie and would split whenever it took enough damage, but with the new wonder weapon, the Die Shockwave, the Megaton could be killed fairly quickly. The Die Shockwave also had 4 upgrades, with the only viable one being the Die Electrobolt. Its damage would scale with how long you were shooting for, and you could also run a lot faster with it shooting. Firebase Z, on the other hand, had a skillful wonder weapon, which would require you to shoot a starting blast, then swap firing modes and spray it in order to explode. This gave ample time for the zombies to hit you, but would wipe out entire hordes if you used it properly. Firebase Z also had many camping spots, which you could sit in for hours on end without much challenge. It also introduced the Mimic for the first time and brought back the Manglers from Black Ops 3. Although annoying, these bosses had very low health, which the wonder weapons could handle easily. I also failed to mention that every Cold War map except for Firebase Z had the ray gun, which was revamped and is honestly one of the greatest wonder weapons of all time. Cold War's wonder weapon choices throughout the maps added to the already established abolishment of the skill gap. Mauerder Toten had the CRBRS, which had variants that the gun could transform into. However, the best variant was ironically just a base wonder weapon, which would shred through Disciples, Manglers, and Panzers. Mauer's Underground could get tight at times, but with everything the player had, it wasn't much of a struggle. The final map, Forsaken, had the player spawn into the game with the rounds increasing rapidly to start, but would slow down after the player teleported. This allowed for some more skillful players to progress mass amounts of rounds before teleporting, and get a better start than others. The Crystal Axe, the wonder weapon, was insane and would slice through entire trains of zombies at once. The gun on the Crystal Axe was underpowered, but the axe was one of the best wonder weapons ever to that point. The Abomination was also added to Forsaken, but was more of just a tanky boss than a problem for the player. Shooting its heads would kill it quickly, but its speed and strength weren't that powerful anyway. Now, I will give a shout out to all the Outbreak maps, but I don't think they should really be included in this video's discussion, as they change not only the skill gap, but the premise of the game itself. These open world experiences would give the player a diversity of wonder weapons and extremely wide open gameplay, which didn't create as many close calls as the regular maps. But before ending off the Cold War section, I'd like to look at this Reddit post from 4 years ago and the comment under it. It begs the question of whether or not the skill jump from Black Ops 2 to Black Ops 3, or the one from Black Ops 3 to Cold War, was more impactful on the skill level. And while Black Ops 3 introduced Gobblegum, more high damage wonder weapons, and the 3-hit down system, the amount of changes in Cold War zombies is ridiculous. Score streaks, armor, salvage, crafting, perk changes, and weapon rarity made Cold War one of, if not the easiest game by far. But looking into the next game, Black Ops 6 could also hold that title. Black Ops 6 is the newest installment to the Zombie series and is currently in its life cycle, so this next section is subject to change. Now, while Black Ops 6 is still being developed more, I do think that there is enough content already out for the game that anything too major will most likely not be adjusted after this video. But where to begin? Black Ops 6 offers the player a newer style of zombies, while also bringing mass amounts of features back from the prior games. Most notably, Black Ops 6 shares a lot in common with Cold War, but that's not to say it doesn't reuse assets from other games as well. To start off, Black Ops 6 directly takes the armor system from Cold War, but altered it to require the player to manually place in their armor plates. And while you could argue that the new armor system takes more skill to master, I would disagree because the armor system itself is still plainly overpowered. The damage reduction from wearing armor doesn't feel like a typical zombies experience, and while the zombies were faster and could hit you easier, Black Ops 6 felt nearly easier than Cold War in a lot of ways. This was reaffirmed further by the implementation of the Gobblegum system from Black Ops 3. The Gobblegum system made a return after almost a decade, but changed some of the key features that define the system to begin with. For example, Black Ops 6 gives players the option to start the game with 3 pre-selected Gobblegum that they could use without even spinning the machine at all. You could instantly pop up Perkaholic, Raindrops, and any other Gobblegum to help you through the early game. Even in Black Ops 3, Gobblegum worked alongside the skill system, as you would likely have to spin more than once just to get the gum you needed. Similar to Black Ops 4's Elixir system, Black Ops 6 totally eliminated that need. On top of these systems, augments replaced the upgrade system from Cold War, making it crucial to upgrade each individual perk, ammo mod, and field upgrade in order to have the best combo possible. You could only equip 2 augments per upgrade, 1 minor and 1 major. I would say the system is more balanced than Cold War's, but overall there is still a definitive meta for each augment. The perk system was kept mostly the same from Cold War, with the perk limit being removed. However, there are even more perks in Cold War, and at the time of recording this, there are 11 in the game, with another possible slot in the future. Every map also had the Wonder Fizz machine spawning in at round 25. Another feature brought from the modern era of zombies is the rarity system, this time allowing players to both buy ammo mods and weapon rarities from the same machine. Unlike Cold War, Black Ops 6 didn't reward players with tons of salvage, making it actually quite beneficial to swap out your starting gun for a higher rarity weapon to help through the rounds. Another use for salvage was the crafting tables, which again provided the player with tons of overpowered weapons and tools they could use to get past rounds. In all honesty, the crafting table in Black Ops 6 was miles better than Cold War's for one reason: it allowed you to purchase mutant injections. This score streak broke the game when it first came out and is still one of the best things to get from crafting. And did I mention that score streaks also drop from the boss zombies, making them extremely common and sometimes even being able to cycle through them multiple times. And the armory system was added to most maps, allowing the player to use different rarities of keys to unlock weapons, score streaks, and perks in-game. On top of the armory system, the Ray Gun and Ray Gun Mark II were also added to most of, if not every map in the game. A brand new feature of Black Ops 6 was the Omni movement, which not only helped the player's basic movement, but also made getting through tight openings of zombies more safe. Even with the Omni movement, however, Black Ops 6 counters training by increasing the zombies' aggression exponentially. It almost felt like Treyarch wanted training to completely die out of the game with the way it worked in Black Ops 6. In my opinion, while on one hand the increased aggression made the zombies harder, the game just felt like synthetic skill that was just there to hinder the player regardless of their abilities. This could be seen further with the crazy amount of boss spam in the higher rounds, which could spawn what felt like endless waves of solely boss zombies to try and limit the player. And it's not just in the background of the game either. It's almost like it's on display as an intended difficulty of the game itself. Focusing on the maps in Black Ops 6, there is an obvious split between the casual and skillful experiences. On the game's launch, both Terminus and Liberty Falls were able to be played, with each having their respective playstyle. Liberty Falls was by far one of the most casual original zombies experiences the community had since Black Ops 2. Liberty Falls allowed the player to get the jet gun, which was buffed extremely for Black Ops 6. This either sucked zombies in or created an explosion that would wipe out entire rounds at once. Unlike in Black Ops 2, the jet gun would never break, and it had infinite ammo if you just recharged it. The bosses on Liberty Falls, the Mangler and Abomination, were overly used through the high rounds and would crowd the player immensely. For Terminus, the map itself was larger and took more skill and knowledge to navigate. The wonder weapon, the Beam Smasher, was able to either shoot a stunning blast, which made zombies more susceptible to damage, or a beam that would wipe out entire rounds. The Beam Smasher was good, but had limited ammo that would run out with its quick fire rate. The Amalgam was introduced, and alongside the Manglers was a very tanky boss that forced the player to go out of their way to kill. Shifting into the next installments, Citadel de Mor placed the player again in a similar situation to DE and gave them 4 elemental wonder weapons, this time in the form of swords. The swords were all quite good by themselves, and none were particularly weak. The Doppelgast was similar to the Amalgam, but would have less health and an increased speed. In my opinion, Citadel de Mor is one of the few maps in the newer games that had balanced, skillful wonder weapons and were better than your starting gun, but could also be used alongside them. The Tomb was another instance of a more casual map offsetting Citadel. The Tomb was small, but gave the players large amounts of space to train. The Ice Staff returned from Black Ops 2 and was alright, but didn't feel the same as it once did. The Mimic was brought back, this time rebranded as a Shock Mimic, but again didn't really change anything too major. It had 4 teleporters around the map that would take you anywhere you wanted to go, and these abilities to both travel across the map in seconds and have underpowered boss zombies made the Tomb one of the easiest maps of the modern era. Finally, Shattered Veil introduced different variants to the Ray Gun Mark II, but unlike Alpha Omega, these ray guns were actually viable throughout the rounds. The Wraithfire version of the Mark II shredded zombies in your path and was by far the best compared to the others. Shattered Veil also implemented a new feature of the Disciple from Cold War, that being the way it controlled almost every zombie around you and allowed them to morph into other bosses if you didn't kill it fast. This actually made Shattered Veil quite difficult, as you had to be on top of your game when playing the map. It also had the Wonder Waff, which received a well-needed buff to its area of effect and was especially useful in the high rounds. Altogether, Shattered Veil balanced out the tough boss zombies with the wonder weapons, and it's easy to see why it's regarded as the best map in recent years. But overall, Black Ops 6 not only gave the player everything Cold War had and more, but also made the zombies themselves feel harder. Although this could be good, I feel as if Treyarch is trying to balance out the newer games by throwing everything they possibly can at the player. This artificial skill is why mass amounts of players despise the newer games and turn to the older, more gritty zombies experiences. Through the almost 2 decades of COD Zombies, it's obvious to see the vast disparity of difficulty in the series. Some experiences limit the player from making simple mistakes, while others do this by the abundance of strenuous variables that the player would have to get past. Whether or not you enjoy the antiquity of the old zombies or the variability of the newer games, one thing is for certain. With every distinct Zombies game, there is a definitive, newly formed measure of skill. From World at War to Black Ops 6 and into the future, we can never be certain about the ever-changing format of Call of Duty Zombies. From this deep dive into the games, where do you, the audience, think the fall from skill occurred?